Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host Ren, and today we continue with the Belmont Saga, Part 3, Chapter 8, the Kestral Tank. And what in the living hell was I thinking? Our chapter today, Chapter 8, the Kestral Tank, is 30 pages long. And I think I remember it when this was in the beta testing range, and I do have beta readers who read this just to make sure I'm not fucking off in the weeds someplace. I remember the beta tester saying this chapter is way too long, and I think I said, well, what do you've been drinking? No, 30 pages, so this is going to be an hour-long reading, so I better get all this peremptory bullshit out of the way. Last week, using the power of the Marian's Road, our hero, Lord Stenstrom, Tara, and Aram made their way into an air shaft in some unknown location. Turns out the unknown location is a Kestral Tank deep under the stony seafloor of Cronenworld. And if you recall, when the sisters spelled it all out, laid it all down for Stenstrom about being their it man, their fist, their lone rider, they said, we are pretty pissed off about this whole Kestral thing, which happened in the Temple of the Exploding Head books. We're not having these weird shape-shifting, evil-doing creatures from the future messing up our league, and we want you to, wherever there are signs of the Kestral, you're gonna go there and you're gonna take it down. And so here we are in a Kestral Tank where monsters are made, the Kalanju are made, and obviously the sisters, since Knife led Stenstrom to here because she did, he's supposed to take this facility down. How he's gonna do that, it's not quite known yet. It's a gigantic ass facility. And also the problem is, okay, he's got all these it man powers, but just like with the Mad Lord before him, the power comes from starlight. And if he is underground, now he can be a little bit underground and the starlight can seep into the ground mystically. Don't ask me, I just wrote it. I just work here, okay? But if he's too far down, and Tara speculates they're miles beneath the surface, the starlight can't get to him, so he's just a normal dude, and with normal dude strength and ability, so all he has is his wits and his skills. So let's get at this. This is going to be a long reading. Holy shit, 30 pages of chapter 8, the Kestral Tank. Here we go. Down the line, he came across a tanned, sturdy-looking female hospitaller with long blonde hair sectioned off into dozens of thin, tightly wound braids. Very attractive. Sort of reminded him of Lily in a tanned, husky sort of way. Her eyes were open, though she seemed especially incapacitated. "Are you Morgan Jetterix of the Grand Order of Hospitallers?" he asked. She weakly nodded, her eyes cloudy. "Are you all right?" "Sure." "I'm very glad to meet you at last," he said, cleaning her off as best he could. "Can you tell me, where is Captain Gwendolyn?" "Down there, I think," Morgan said, indicating down the far end of the hall. "Thank you. Aram and Lady Alestia are coming. We're all getting out of here." "Don't think I can walk," Morgan said, her voice barely a whisper. "Well, then we'll carry you." Several coffins away, he saw a tall woman in a lieutenant's uniform, slowly trying to stand, her long brown hair in a tangle, a rapier hung at her side. Despite himself, Stenstrom smiled as he pulled yet another Marian free from a coffin. "Are you Captain Gwendolyn?" he asked as he cleaned off the Marian. She seemed startled at the sound of her own name. She stood tall, with excellent posture. She appeared to be out on her feet, her mind locked in a loop. "Captain," he asked. She gave a start. She turned. Lieutenant Gwendolyn, commanding officer, fleet scouting ship Demophalon John. She looked at him without seeing. What's our status? Status is getting better. Gwendolyn shook her head. That is not a proper response, crewman. Her green eyes were glassy and far away. The mirage. Stenstrom remembered the mirage, her crazed face. Here it was. Well, I'm not a proper fellow, he said, moving on to the next coffin. Gwendolyn looked like she was going to get mad for a moment. She stared at Stenstrom hard and didn't appear to have any recollection of him. She was confused, lost, or on the precipice of utter raving madness. Who are you? What sort of uniform is that? I shall have to demerit you for being out of dress, she said. I'm a friend, remember? He noted she was wearing a Marian beaded necklace. All of the fleet crew were. She blinked as things sorted themselves out in her muddled mind. She exhaled. Are you perhaps Paymaster Stenstrom? He smiled at her. In the flesh at last. She strode up to him, her boots pounding on the shiny floor, wet with the fluid from the coffin. She stood there in a proud, formal way. Then I would like to properly introduce myself. I am Lieutenant Gwendolyn, Lady Apprentice, commander of the fleet scouting ship Demophalon John, 3rd Wing. I, as of this moment, formally relieve you of your unbonded command, now that I have boarded. Please do not take this as an indictment of any kind. I wish to entertain you aboard my ship as a welcome visiting dignitary. She was silent, apparently expecting Stenstrom to offer a formal greeting in kind. She obviously had no idea where she was. She had blanked out the last day or two out of her head. He looked up at her as he cleaned a Marian's face. "Oh, hi," he said in return. Gwendolyn was covered in the brown fluid from the coffin, as were her boots, her coat, and her hands, which were turning an angry shade of red. Stenstrom stood. "Captain, you are covered in Kestral fluid. It is very bad for you." As if awaking from a daydream, she looked at her hands, pulled a handkerchief from her coat pocket, and dabbed her fingers. I'm sorry for being a bit out of sorts." Her whole body was trembling. "Your pardon." Her handkerchief was equally soaked in fluid. He gently took it from her and tossed it aside, cleaning her hands with his cloth. She stared at her hands as he worked, as if afraid to meet his gaze. "I am sorry I have cost you your chair today. I wish to make it up to you." Tara linked up with them. "Well, I think that's all of 'em, Belle," she said, in a little out of breath. "What's the count, Tara?" "Looks like we got 34 pilgrims of Marion, 42 fleet personnel, and 10 civilians. Appear to be from Mallets, if their dress is any indication. The civilians appear to be in the worst shape. Who knows how long they've been trapped in these coffins?" Gwendolyn reacted a little. No, she said. "There are 82 souls under my command. They are still on my ship at their posts. I was not aware you had civilians aboard your vessel, Paymaster. Private, I wish a complete accounting of these civilians, their names, point of origin, and business aboard a fleet ship. Report back to me on the hour. Understood? I'll expect a more accurate count next time." Tara looked at Gwendolyn, puzzled for a moment. "Oh, are you Captain Gwendolyn?" She reached up and felt Gwendolyn's bicep through her coat. "Oh yeah, Belle, I think she would have beaten the daylights out of you," she said, trying to lighten things up. "That really is not appropriate, Private," Gwendolyn said. Stenstrom interceded. "Tara, get everybody rounded up. I think there's a sizable alcove down that way," he said, pointing behind him. "It's defensible, and I think we can use it to recover a bit and get things sorted out. Move them along as best you can. Get Aram to help." "Okay, Belle." She trotted away and started pulling people to their feet. "Captain," Stenstrom said, "may I have a word with you?" "I don't think now is a convenient time. There is much to do, and I sincerely think we need to have a momentary word alone. She appeared hesitant. Well, all right, for a moment only. They walked down the corridor for a bit and found another alcove. Moving deep into it, they stopped. Yes, Paymaster, what can I do for you? As you can see, It's all right, Gwen, he said, interrupting her. Pardon? It's all right. It's just you and me here. No crew watching, nobody to see. I don't understand what you're getting at. We are not on the Seeker. I have no real idea as to where we are, but it's not the ship. Gwendolyn looked around for a moment, trying to sort things out. Where is your ship, Gwen? Can you tell me? She became frantic. She gulped in fitful grabs of air. My ship? It's crashed? End of mission. No, that can't be. Where's my ship? She righted herself, eyes darting, hysteria moving over her. My ship! The water! I must... Gwen, I know you've been through a lot, and I know you must be in pain. We have a few minutes to ourselves, so take it. Sort it out. Write it out. We're friends, remember? Let me help you. She looked down and put a reddened hand to her hair. Then her face collapsed into utter anguish. She fell into his arms and wept in racking stages. My crew dead. Ship lost. They were in my head, sifting my mind. I couldn't get them out. Who was in your mind, Gwen? I don't know. The things in the water. I couldn't think, couldn't see, couldn't reason. Morgan. I think I almost killed Morgan, and then those people came. They killed my men on that boat, and then they strafed the survivors, all those bodies in the water. I couldn't save my men. The Marians, Gwen. Where did the Marians come from? I don't know where they came from. They were trying to help us. They got us off the ship. Stenstrom let her get it out for a minute more. She dried her tears and gazed at him, a fair amount of the confusion melting away. Thanks, Belle, she said, her previous formal bearing gone. I think I was just a hard shove away from falling into utter madness. I really needed that. I feel much better. Thank you. I have been looking forward to meeting you for some time, just not under these circumstances. How are the cobwebs? Clearing, thank you. I wish I could be more presentable. You're most presentable, Gwen. How's your skin feel? Gwendolyn held her reddened hands out and wiggled her fingers. It hurts, but I'll be fine. I'm fine. Stenstrom checked her hands. Her skin was red and inflamed, but the Kestral fluid was gone. It was fortunate she had spent so little time in the coffin. He checked her clothes. They were damp, but appeared to be quickly drying. At least that was something. Where are we, Belle? I think we were taken underwater. How did you get here? I'm not for certain. I think we got here the same way the Marians got here. I'm just not sure how we're going to get back out. Drying the last of her tears, they made their way back to the group, moving past the open coffins and spilt fluid. Gwendolyn was highly conflicted as they walked. I really don't feel up to fighting with you over who's in command, Belle, you or me. I truly don't want it. I don't feel up to it right now. But for my crew, I wish to conscript you, Gwen. What? Your vessel is end of mission, her bell lost. I wish to temporarily conscript you to the crew of the Seeker. Assignment? Ship's engineer. I recall you mentioning that you had training in engineering. I think that will... Done! She said quickly, approving of his suggestion, the idea apparently taking flight in her head. I accept. I submit to the conscription and am honored. Good thinking, Belle. Gwen, I don't want you to feel that I'm usurping your authority. No, not at all. In fact, I would argue that going from the captain's chair of a scouting ship to the engineer of a main fleet warbird is quite a promotion. I'm honored. It's just temporary. Absolutely. She brightened a little, having settled the command issue, which apparently had been troubling her. They continued down the corridor. Tara had moved the group a good distance from where they had been confined, which was a good thought. She had gotten them into a large alcove where they were all huddled up tightly. Tucked inside, most of the Marians and crew were scattered about on the floor asleep. Tara was sitting near the mouth, keeping guard, humming a song from Baz, her SK laid out on her lap. She looked dreadfully tired. Morgan Jeterix was next to Tara, either asleep or unconscious, her marine coat draped over her. Aram was asleep nearby. Lady Alesta was tucked up next to him, Quaso quietly asleep, her head resting on his chest. She had shared her green robe with him, the both of them huddled up within. The whole alcove was full of sounds of people sleeping, a rather peaceful sound. He looked down to either end of the corridor, seeing nothing but coffins and tubes stretching off into infinity, no Druries in sight. He listened. He heard the steady pounding throb of machinery. Seemed safe for the moment. He carefully stepped into the interior. The fleet crew was suffering from overwhelming fatigue. Those who were still awake seemed as addled as Gwendolyn had been, their mental state delicate at best. Stenstrom knelt and introduced himself, the crew listening with mouths lolled open. As with Gwendolyn, after a little talking, they began to sort themselves out and make sense of what had happened to them. Elsewhere, he saw the Marians soothing other crewmen, holding them, singing in their ears. They acknowledged him with a simple nod as he passed. The Marians showed remarkable toughness that greatly impressed him. Without wanting to wish this situation upon anyone, he was glad they were here, nevertheless. He returned to the mouth of the alcove. "See anything, Tara?" he asked quietly. "Nope, just a whole lot of nothing. I suppose it's a good thing. These people are exhausted. I'm not doing too well myself. A situation like this just makes you tired. I'd almost rather the jury show and get it over with." Gwendolyn looked wearily down the corridor. "Any thoughts on who those men might be? They're monsters." Tara shrugged and closed her eyes. "They're called the Drury Brothers." Gwendolyn seated herself. "The Drury Brothers? Aren't those pirates from antiquity?" she said. "I recall my uncle telling stories about them when I was a child. Silly tales, like the boogeyman. The Drurys would fall upon lone travelers when they were at their weakest and take flight the moment help arrived." "Sounds like them," Stenstrom said. "But that would make them at least 400 years old." Tara gave a wry smile. "Boogeyman never dies. That's what we say on Baz." Gwendolyn's state of mind appeared fragile. Though she tried to mask it, her eyes betrayed her. She was utterly terrified. "Tara, let's not ascribe any supernatural powers to these cretins, for they don't deserve it," Stenstrom said. "The Drurys are robots, Gwen. Nothing more." "Robots?" "Yes, flesh replica robots, well crafted, highly complex, but robots nonetheless. I took one down myself on the Seeker and discovered the truth." Gwendolyn wasn't convinced. "They didn't act like any robot I've ever seen." "Ghosts in the machine," Tara said. "Their spirits override their circuitry and haunt the logic. We hear tell on Baz the Drurys were so rotten hell won't have anything to do with them. So they walk the wastelands, giving life to the lifeless." She craned her neck and looked down the corridor. "I get the creepy feeling there's a lot more than just 4 of them running around here somewhere. And the sad thing is, they could hit us at any moment. We're just sitting ducks." Aram awoke and shifted his position, Lady Alesta moving with him. "Looks like you've made a friend," Stenstrom said quietly. "Oh, she's quite the thing, isn't she?" He gently adjusted the ends of her thick black hair. "Sure is." Stenstrom saw Morgan asleep under Tara's coat. "How's Morgan Jeterix?" he asked. Tara looked at her. "Oh, she's fine, but she's in no fit state to go on a long hike. She's going to have to be carried out of here, and so are all these civilians we just picked up. I did manage to salvage most of her hospitaller instruments and scanners. Those might come in handy." "Are you trained in the medical arts?" Gwendolyn asked. Nope. She paused, seemed confused for a moment. Have I asked you this before? Yep, Tara replied. Stenstrom gazed down the corridor, deserted except for the long line of clean glass coffins. He kept waiting to hear the sounds of the Druries charging down the corridor, but so far he heard nothing but the steady rumble of machinery. He turned to all the people huddled in the alcove, both fleet crew and Marians. Gwen, how long has it been since you and your crew have eaten or had anything to drink? I can't recall. It's been a while. She toyed with the Marian necklace around her neck, rubbing the beads back and forth with her fingers. And you don't know where these Marians came from? I really don't. As I said, they got us out of the ship. They were trying to help us. They put these necklaces on us and the dream faded, Gwendolyn said. He shrugged and spoke quietly. Well, tell me about it in more detail later. We can't stay here for long. Tara, how deep are we? At least 3 miles, Belle, and I don't think there's an accessible entrance or exit to this place we can use. I'm pretty sure we're under the sea. Well, there's gotta be a way out. Stenstrom stood. I'm going to scout around and get a feel for the layout of the place. Perhaps there's a more defensible area to hide in or an obvious way out. We can formulate a plan when I get back. He pulled one of his ints and gave it to Aram. Gwendolyn stood and brushed herself off. Well, I'm coming with you. It's not safe. No, you stay here, Gwen, and keep everybody quiet. I won't be long. Tara smiled. He'll be all right. He's really sneaky. They'll never know he's there. Gwendolyn was determined. No, he'll need my help. She adjusted the scabbard of her fedula and cocked her mims. Stenstrom did his usual fade into the shadows. Belle, Gwendolyn said, looking around, still holding her mims. Belle? See, I told you, Tara said. I have no idea how he does that, but he promised he'd show me. Isn't it cool? Belle, Gwen said, wandering out into the corridor, trying to keep her voice down. Stenstrom laughed a bit as he proceeded down the corridor, certain that of all his skills his mother taught him, the ability to move unseen was the most useful. Now he must get to it. As before, he was in a long corridor, lined on one side with glass coffins, about 7 feet tall and 3.5 feet wide. He called them glass, for he had nothing else to call them. They looked and felt like glass, though, as he now knew, they were much, much stronger than glass. Above him was a metal ceiling thoroughly packed with tubing and wires, marked at intervals by grates admitting air. Below was a clean stone or concrete floor, polished to a mirror-like shine. On the other side of the corridor to his right was a maze of machinery and piping, very complex and very well crafted, eventually giving way to a large alcove, exactly like the one his people were hiding in down the way. A simple railing painted olive green ran along the length of piping. Apparently, the alcove was some sort of expanded maintenance area. As he moved, keeping to the shadows, he began to see a pattern to the machinery. Piping and alcoves, they repeated every 150 feet. Apparently, they serviced a set number of coffins in brown fluid and oxygen, and then began again. Each coffin he saw upon close examination was serviced with 2 thick hoses and a webwork of delicate wiring. He was struck by how clean and orderly the whole place was. Everything from the shiny floor to the painted pipes and railings were squeaky clean and well maintained, not a speck of dirt or dust to be found. Another thing, not another soul, for as far as he could see, the place seemed to be quite deserted. He continued on, wondering how far he'd come. How big could this place possibly be? After a bit more walking, he came across a narrow side corridor. Plunging in, he saw several holding cells guarded by a single metal door, each cell empty. Must have been where the crew and the Marians were being held before being put in the tanks. The corridor ended after 100 feet. He thought to bring the group into this area, but decided against it. This area was really no better than their current hideout. No place in this tank was safe or secure. The best thing was to get out as quickly as possible. He returned to the main corridor and continued. After he'd walked a good mile or so, the machinery and piping to his right gave way and opened up into a gigantic space. He went to the railing and looked over the side. He saw a huge artificial chasm. On the other side of the chasm, about 1,000 feet away, was a similar corridor to the one he was standing in. Below, he could see more corridors dropping down into the distance until they faded into the darkness. The same for above. Floor after floor of long corridors strewn with glass coffins going up and up. He leaned over the side and looked up. That certainly must be the way they had to go. He continued on, part of his thoughts quickly becoming convinced that this place was truly endless. He wondered about the Kestrals. Clearly, they once used this mammoth facility to create Kalanju at their leisure, to sufficiently drive them mad and bend them to their will. But the Kestrals were gone. He had been to the conference with Captain Davidge and the sisters at Armenelos following the Kestral affair. Though he didn't understand all of what was being said, apparently the Kestrals came from very far away, well past the outer reaches of Zaffin space, and had access to Cana and the League by means of some sort of temporal device that was determined to be located in the Halalands of Cana. He'd stood in it himself, the temple of the exploding head. This demented temple allowed the Kestrals to access the distant pass and allowed them to step out of thin air without the need for starships or vehicles of any kind. The Kestrals were not human. They were some sort of alien shape-shifting species and were immune to the effects of temporal gravity. And he recalled the sisters fell upon the Kestral's temporal device and laid it waste, in theory denying the Kestrals its further use from their fastness in the distant future. So, if that was the case, and the sisters' assessment that the Kestrals were no longer able to reach the League at will, then this facility is most likely abandoned, or populated only by those who were present at the time of the temple's destruction, the Drurys and possibly a few now shipwrecked Kestrals. The Kestrals' horrid facility was marooned in League space. Escape. Just how were they going to do this? They were, as a group, exhausted from fear and their ordeal, hungry, near psychotic, and in pain from the coffins and the Cronin's mental attacks. Gwendolyn had seemed at the brink of insanity not long ago. And they had to think about the wounded, Morgan Jeterix, and the civilians they'd found. Those would have to be carried, a grueling task, considering the distances involved. And what about the Marians? He thought about the Marians Road, the mystical wall of fog that transported Tara and Aram to this place in a flash. He didn't expect such a road would be available to spirit them back out again. It could not be so easy. But no matter. They were all getting out of here. No one was to be left behind. He continued on, but felt far away from his people, and he wanted to return to them. The sheer size of the place and the loneliness began to get to him. He felt spooked. Ghosts in the machines, Tara said. The Drurys, not even hell wanted them. He saw leering faces and reaching hands coming out at him from the nooks and crannies. From behind the drone of machinery, he heard his people screaming. Another half mile. The corridor ended in a solid stone wall with a downturn of pipes, hoses, and cabling. He looked around. There simply had to be a way up, though no apparent way presented itself. The Kestral's habit of simply teleporting where they wanted to go was proving inconvenient. Assuming nobody in the group had the gift of waft, he didn't have it, and he didn't think Tara a Bazar or Aram a Calvert did either. It was possible Gwendolyn could, and perhaps some of her crew. The Marians certainly couldn't do it. They needed a physical way to ascend to the surface and climb out. He supposed that they could try climbing up the open face of the chasm to the next level and so on. He could do it. Gwendolyn no doubt could. as well as Tara, but what about the rest? Could they, even assisted, make the climb? And then he would have to do it over and over again. Not possible. They would be terrified, and some might even refuse such a route. There had to be another way. Investigating the compaction of pipes and tubing overhead, he discovered a fairly wide hole leading up to the next level. Apparently some sort of raceway allowing for the connections of piping from floor to floor. He checked the floor of his current level and found the same thing, a large hole about 8 feet wide full of tubes. If all the floors had a similar hole, then they could climb up and out. He dug into the cables leading up, and they were a tight mess, the hole seemingly packed solid. He produced a marzible and poked around, finding a number of ties that he could cut and discard. After several minutes' work, he found he had cut enough ties that the solid mess of tubes and cables gave way. Soon, squeezing through the mass, he emerged on the level above. Just to make sure the feat wasn't a fluke, he tried it again, and soon it made his way to the next level after several minutes. He did 2 more floors and found the ascent, though tight, was perfectly possible and much safer than climbing up the open face of the chasm. Good. So unless something else presented itself, this was how it had to be. Moving quickly, he made the long walk back to the others to relate his findings. When he got back, he was greeted with a terrible commotion. One of the civilians they'd rescued was on a rampage. He stumped about with blackened skin. His eyes were alight in madness. He drooled and gnashed his teeth. He was holding Tara's SK, waving it around. "Now look," she said, holding her hands out. "I know you don't want to hurt anybody. Give me my gun and we'll try to get you some relief." The civilian stood there, holding the gun in a shaking grip. Gotta get out of this, it hurts! Creation, it hurts! He waved the gun around in his shaking grip. He put the gun to his temple. "Oh, it hurts!" He pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The palm sprander prevented the gun from firing. Stenstrom got behind him and pulled the SK from his grasp. The two struggled for a moment. He slipped a pink holy stone into his palm. He put his arms around him, and together they slumped to the floor. Gotta get out. "You're fine," Stenstrom said. "You're fine. Just relax. Hold on tight to the holy stone and relax." The civilian, though still in pain, calmed and relaxed a little in Stenstrom's grip. Tara fetched her gun. "I was just sitting there when he jumped me. I wasn't sure if I'd set the palm sprander on my SK. Good thing I did, or his brains would be all over the place. Poor fellow's in a lot of pain, Belle. He's out of his head." Stenstrom picked him up. "The holy stone should keep him quiet until we can get him help." He carried him back into the alcove and gave a pink holy stone to the rest of the civilians, all of them writhing and blackened, the Marians trying to help them. The pinkies seemed to be helping a little. They sat back down at the mouth of the alcove, and Stenstrom described his findings. "And you think taking this route is our best option?" a very tired-looking Gwendolyn asked. "And by the by, I can't waft, in case you were wondering. A few of my crew can, I believe." "Well, that makes 2 of us. Climbing through the tubing is the only option I saw. It's a little cramped, and doubtless many shall need assistance, but that shouldn't be an issue. We will assist all those needing it." Tara was skeptical. "I don't know, Belle. I just don't get the feeling going up is our best bet." "Well, what are your thoughts?" "It's confusing, but I'm pretty sure if we go all the way to the top, we're going to find nothing but stone once we get there." She paused. "I really think going that way is the way to go." She pointed down and to her right a little. Gwendolyn rubbed her eyes, heavy with bags. She had a straight, clean scar on her right cheek. "Gwen, how's your skin?" She nodded. It's all right. Why don't you get some sleep? We all need to rest up before we get started anyway," Stenstrom said. Gwendolyn didn't argue. She laid her fedula down in its sheath and was about to lay her head on Stenstrom's shoulder, but saw Tara watching her, and instead tucked up onto the cold floor next to him. Moments later, she was asleep. Aram carefully stepped over the sleeping people and joined them. "Oh, I wish we had some coffee," he lamented, stretching. "Welcome awake, Aram. We were just discussing our plan for getting out of here. I thought to lead the group up, but Tara thinks we should bear down into the east, if that way is east. He nodded. I'd agree with that. What are your thoughts? I was thinking about what Lady Alesta was telling me. Oh, you mean your girlfriend over there? Tara said, smiling. Aram thought about it. Yes, why yes, my girlfriend. I rather think so. She was saying that she and her Marian cadre have been coming to this place for years, freeing those lured in by the Cronins. They call this place Idam. Apparently ships crash into this planet with a fair amount of frequency. Not fleet ships normally, but smaller, solitary vessels, merchantmen, yachts, and the like. And Alesta and her group watch for the arrival of the fallen shipping and come to this place in an effort to save them. They don't use starships to arrive here. They use something Alesta calls the Road. Stenstrom smiled. The Marian's Road. It's some sort of arcane portal leading from one place to the next. The wall of fog we saw aboard the Seeker, that was the Marian's Road, I'm certain. Alesta says in this case the road was dispelled and has led to this situation. A small vessel appeared on their boat just as they were about to make good their escape. The arrival of that vessel fouled the road and threw off their cloak of invisibility as their faith wavered. She said that the vessel, with its power field, dispelled the road. I suppose these events prove there truly is something to the Star of Marian, that the claim exists. In my office, I had a dream. I saw my sister Virginia, and she was sitting on one of the Marian ruins scattered about our manor. She was crying, said her children were dead and that she couldn't save them. Aram took interest. I've always been fascinated by dreams. What do you interpret the image of your sister to mean? My sister Virginia has always claimed she can see the Star of Marian, that is plain as day to her. I think this Star of Marian was talking to me through the image of my sister. The star was pained by what had happened to the Marians and the fleet crew. She told me to depower the Seeker, and a road would come for us, and here we are. Apparently, power fields disrupt this metaphysical road, and that appears to be proved. Alesta also says there was someone in a red and black robe sitting inside the vehicle that fouled their escape, Aram said. Knife? Sounds like that knife person we saw in the sisters' presence. She is supposed to lead me in the direction the sisters want me to go. Obviously, they wanted me here in this Kestral dungeon, and they want me to destroy it. Yes, I thought much the same thing, and apparently they don't care who suffers in the meantime. Aram looked back at the sleeping Alesta. Look at all these innocent people. Tara took exception. Yeah, but things tend to work out. Things happen for a reason. People die, but maybe they would have died regardless, no matter what happened. Your number's up, it's up. At least in this case, maybe some good will come out of it. Gwendolyn awoke and looked at the floor in uncomfortable misery. She took off her coat and wadded it up into a ball to use as a pillow. Gwen, Stenstrom said, it's all right. Come here, please, and sit next to me. Bleary-eyed, she looked at Tara. Don't worry about Tara. Come on, Gwen. Make yourself comfortable. Get some sleep. You're gonna need it. She scooted up to him and laid her head on his chest. Stenstrom draped his HRN coat around her. Take your boots off. You'll feel better, Tara said, her boots long since removed. Gwendolyn didn't respond. Instead, she closed her eyes and she slept. Tara smiled. Stubborn? Ah well, what'd I tell you? So let's organize our thoughts. Clearly, this facility is a Kestral Tank where they create Kalanju. As the Kestrals are now denied access to the League, this facility is cut adrift and abandoned. Now, what is the Cronin connection to this puzzle in turn? And what is the Drury connection? Tara spoke up. The Cronins are probably here to protect the facility, to prevent it from being detected by the League. I mean, look where we are. Just a crotch shot away from both Cana and Onaris, the bloody heart of the League, on a dwarf planet that doesn't appear on any charts. They're using their skills with illusion to cover everything up. Aram agreed with that line of thought. And I'll wager the Druries are here in turn to feed and maintain the Cronins and possibly maintain this facility. You say that at one time The Cronins actively attacked Baz. They must have been here on this waterlogged rock the whole time, starving, and sought to satiate themselves by feeding on the people of Baz. 400 years ago, that's when the legend of the Drury sprang up on Onaris. I imagine that Kestrels captured them, found them to be of suitable, disreputable ilk, and imprinted their minds, recreating them as powerful robots here to oversee this facility and stealthily seek out discreet prey and feed it to the Cronins. Quietly, so as not to disturb Gwendolyn, Stenstrom responded. That might also account for the Drury's apparent need for metal. Recall, Chance Drury mentioned wanting to take the Seeker. I assume for salvage. If that's the case, they probably need to keep themselves stocked in refined metals for the construction of their replacement robotic bodies and the upkeep of their ship. I got a good look at the head as I battled Innocent Drury, and though it's in the basic configuration of a Weber-class vessel, it's packing a host of add-ons. That's a key. The Drurys must have a large dock here somewhere, large enough to house a starship or two, and I'll wager that Demophalon John is currently in it. And I'll further wager that the Seeker is there too. We did see the incoming blip just as we powered off. Aram was distressed. Pardon me, he said. He stood and made his way out of the alcove, choosing a direction, and went down the corridor. A minute later, Alesta quietly appeared. She stepped into the mouth of the alcove and looked around. She held her green robe shut. He went to the bathroom, Tara said. She blushed and sat down, waiting for him to return. Lady Alesta, Stenstrom said, I wanted to thank you for doing what you could for Lieutenant Gwendolyn and her crew. You and your folk are very brave. I have always admired the Marians, and I do so now more than ever. She smiled. Well, thank you, sir. And thank you for coming to our aid. We are very blessed. Just returning the favor, Tara said. Alesta was perplexed. Pardon? Never mind, Stenstrom said. I believe your star came to me and asked us to help you. We arrived here in a wall of fog. That is our road. May we expect that the road will return and spirit us back out? She shook her head. No, my lord, there's too much power here. In the presence of power, the road will not form. We may be deposited into a place brimming with power, as this place is. However, we cannot be retrieved until the power is cut or otherwise dispelled. So unless we turn off the lights, we're stuck here, Tara said. Alesta looked sad. May I ask? Lord Aram says he saw me standing in the corridor of your ship. Is that true? Yep, Tara answered, and he hasn't stayed quiet about it since. Alesta was confused. She turned to Stenstrom. My lord? He did, and we saw you too. We saw you in the light of an arcane lantern. Aram was very taken with you. He has been most anxious to make your acquaintance. He is in your service? She asked. He's my master helmsman, Stenstrom replied, and I'm proud to say he's my friend as well. Mine too, Tara said. He's a great guy. Alesta nodded. Helmsman, he steers your vessel? Yes, a very important posting. Where is your ship? I shall inform you that the people are sick and hungry and need tending as soon as possible. Stenstrom looked back and saw the lumpy huddles of sleeping people jungled up in the alcove. Our ship is far away. We're on our own down here. Aram returned. Alesta looked up at him and burst into a smile. She opened her green robe and invited him to sit next to her. He did, and she snuggled into his side, closing the robe. Stenstrom put his arm around Gwendolyn. She settled into him a little further, gripping him tightly. Tara, Aram, I think I'll let Gwen sleep here for a bit. Then I'm heading out again. Where are you off to this time? I'm going the way you suggested, east and down a little. I'm going to see if the Seeker is nearby. If so, I'm going to board her, get us food and drink, and then we're getting out of here. Alesta took off several of her beaded necklaces. Sir, may I offer you and Lady Tara one of my necklaces? It shall protect you from the unreal. Tara took one and put it on. "Thanks," she said. Alesta put one around Aram's neck and straightened it for him. "For you," she said softly, and then offered one to Stenstrom. "Please, good sir." Stenstrom reached out and took it. "With great thanks," he said. He started to put it on and felt a warm hand stop him. It was Gwendolyn, partially awake. "Wear mine, Belle." She took off the necklace she was wearing and put it around Stenstrom's head. "I want you to wear mine." And with that, we conclude Part 3, Chapter 8, The Kestral Tank. I said it was 30 pages. I was mistaken. It's only 20 pages. That's plenty. That's plenty. So, they free the Marians and the fleet crewmen. Stenstrom meets Morgan Jeterix, and though she's out of danger, she's really weak from the injury she sustains, and she's not up for a long walk, and this Kestral tank is huge, so they're going to have to carry her out. Yeah, then he meets Lieutenant Gwendolyn, and Lieutenant Gwendolyn was in a bad space mentally. She was on the verge of stark raving madness, and he had to gently walk her back to reality, which he did, and let her get out all her emotion of the crash and the violation of her mind by the Cronins, and then the gunning down of her crew. That's a lot. She was in shock a little bit. Helped her to alleviate the command situation. He conscripted her aboard the Seeker as ship's engineer, and recall Gwendolyn always thought that her true calling was engineering, not command. She didn't really she was a very reluctant commander, not an overly skilled one. Not everyone's fit to command, but engineering is her true calling, and being conscripted to the engineer's chair of a warbird is actually a big step up. It's a big promotion, because a scouting ship is not very prestigious. They get the crew and the Marians huddled up in an alcove, but the thing is, they're here in this tank, and the Drurys are somewhere nearby, and they speculate that this tank is abandoned, as they mention in the text in the temple books. When the Temple of the Exploding Head was destroyed, the Kestrels lost their anchor point in the deep past. The Kestrels are deep into the future. In fact, Atrajak of Want, he went on a long mission to combat the Kestrels in their home backyard, their home planet. He found their planet, but he went there in a great Venera ship with his Monoma army, and his Monomies quickly died because they don't last long in space. But when he got there, there was nobody there, and he couldn't figure out why. And the reason there was nobody there is because the Kestrels hadn't evolved yet. It'd be millions of years into the future before they show up. So the Kestrels are way off in the future, and they use temporal anchor points like the Temple of the Exploding Head to sail the seas of time. But without the temple, they can't get to the League because they're too far into the future. So this tank, which they designed and maintained, is now abandoned, except for the Drurys, who appear to be the caretakers of this tank. And they speculate that the Kestrels imprinted the minds of the Drurys way back 400 years ago, and placed them into these advanced robotic bodies with the mission of maintaining this tank and feeding the Cronins, who they put there to hide the tank, to keep it hidden in illusion. So that's the whole setup. They're deep underground, really no way to get out, but Tara thinks if they go down into the east, or just pointing in one direction, which they're calling east, is a possible way out. So Stenstrom speculates that the Seeker might be nearby, that the Drurys, might have actually taken the Seeker and brought it down under the sea and into a dock of some sort, so they can take its metal, because they need lots and lots of highly refined metal. So next week, Part 3, Chapter 9, The Dock. Stenstrom's going to go check it out and see if he can find where the Drurys are hanging out, and if the Seeker or the Demophalon John is actually there. So until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.